Exactly 10 years ago, I was on a train to Purley, South London, holding a bucket of flowers and wondering what kind of evening I was walking into. I had met Pinky Lilani just a few weeks earlier, and somehow she invited me to her home for dinner. Who does that? I was thinking. Especially in England. Who is inviting a stranger to their home? At the time, I didn't know this would become a decade-long friendship, and I will dine in her home many times. Or that this woman would quietly challenge everything I was taught about success. As far as I can remember, I was told that in order to succeed, I had to be better than others. I had to compete, stay ahead, work harder. That belief was ingrained throughout my education and later reinforced in the job market. I still see it everywhere around me. People believing that in order to survive, we have to take something from others. That success is a zero-sum game. And it has led our society into exhaustion, burnout, mistrust, a constant feeling of being behind, of never being good enough. But what if the very qualities we've been taught to see as weaknesses are exactly what the future will reward? In this episode, I'm speaking with Pinky Lilani, who is a motivational speaker, food expert, and internationally acclaimed women's advocate and founder of the Women of the Future program. Pinky was born in Kolkata, India, and raised in the Ismaili community, which is a branch of Shia Islam. She also went to Irish Catholic convent. She moved to the UK in 1978, and she had never been in the UK before. She didn't know anyone here, apart from her husband and his family. And she married him only a couple of weeks before, in an arranged marriage. Her journey began by turning what she once saw as a weakness into strength. She couldn't cook at all. She couldn't even boil an egg. So she decided to learn. And that decision led her to become a cookbook author and eventually to teach the staff at the Buckingham Palace how to cook Indian food. Curiosity and kindness became a guiding force in everything she did. Over the past few decades, Pinky built an extraordinary network, one that led her to dine with Queen Elizabeth, connect with prime ministers and leaders across the political spectrum, and speak on some of the most prominent stages in the world. She has received many recognitions, including being named one of the 100 most powerful women in the UK by BBC Radio 4, one of the 100 most connected women by JQ magazine, and one of the 30th most powerful Muslim women in Britain by The Times. She also received the Commander of the British Empire, an Order of the British Empire. But Pinky didn't build her network for recognition. She did it to lift others. The empire she created has empowered thousands of women. She has opened countless doors for so many people, including myself, often quietly, often behind the scenes. And yet, her way of being has never changed. It doesn't matter whether Pinky is with the royals or speaking to a stranger on the train, she shows up exactly the same, open, interested, and deeply human. In this episode, we challenge the competitive model of success and explore a different way forward, rooted in kindness, curiosity, and collaboration, which are the values that matter most in uncertain times. If you had to describe kindness, not as an idea or some concept, but something you truly lived, how would you describe it?
Well, I have a mantra, and my mantra is you have not lived a perfect day unless you've done something for someone who can never repay you. And that is the essence of kindness for me, for doing something every day for people and having no expectations of return.
That is so beautiful. You've opened so many doors that most of people could really just dream of. And the irony is that that happened because you opened so many times doors to your home. For people you didn't know, to complete strangers, you invited people over, you cooked for them. I would have guessed that it's probably not exaggeration that since you moved to the UK, you probably hosted thousands of people in this house. And many people believe that in order to succeed, we do have to compete. We have to be tough, we have to push. But you proved through your life that there is other way of doing it. And that other way is through kindness and curiosity. How did you discover that kindness could be actually the path to success rather than an obstacle?
I think kindness lies at the heart of everyone's life if one takes it seriously. And I don't believe that competition and being tough helps you to succeed. It may help you a little bit on the journey, but I think really to succeed, you have to have humility, kindness, integrity, and purpose. And I think you have to be the best version of yourself. So for me, kindness and inviting people to my home gives me enormous pleasure because I love meeting new people, but I also want them to meet others. And I don't want to be part of their whole journey. If I can introduce them to someone, and I'll just ask someone because within 4 minutes of meeting people, I decide, have they got the values that I treasure? If they don't have them, then I'll stay away. I won't badmouth them. So I'll invite people I don't know, people I meet on the train, to come to my house for lunch. And people say, who invites someone you met on the train? But it always comes back to really, it pays you back in a huge way. I find anyone I invite does something else for me I least expect. So kindness, to me, is the greatest quality that all of us can actually embody.
Would you like to tell the story about your grandfather and when you went to the cafe in Edgware Road? Because this is such a great story.
Yeah, no, my grandfather was, one of the kindest people, I guess. He lived his life in India, and I guess all of us inherited part of that. But the story that's really lovely is, about 20 years ago, I was working with some big food companies, and so I was taking them to different restaurants. So I told this client of mine I'll take her to a restaurant that was Burmese. At that time, they called them Burmese. Now they say Myanmar. So I took her in Edgware Road, and it's a small restaurant, and the man who owned it was going down all the tables talking to people, and he came to our table. I love Burmese food because I'd grown up eating it. And he came round and he said, where are you from? And I said, I'm an Ismaili from Calcutta. And he said, I'm alive today because when I escaped from Burma with my family in the Second World War and went to Calcutta, we were all going to be killed. But an amazing Ismaili guy saved my life. And we are alive today because of this man. So I said, what's his name? Because the Ismaili community isn't huge. Maybe I'll know him or know who he is. And he said his name was Khan Bahadur Dasani. And I said, that's my grandfather. And he said, we are alive today because of his kindness from 50 years ago. So, kindness never goes away. It always stays with people. And I think we all have to look, and we have to go back and remember those stories. So the kindness of my grandfather was so well known that he had the honor of meeting Her Majesty, the Queen, when she went to Calcutta. And I have this lovely picture of the two of them together. The first time I went to Buckingham Palace, I took the picture of Her Majesty with my grandfather, and I said, you are here with my grandfather in 1961. And she was delighted to see it. So, things like that last for a long time.
I also love the fact that you always carry candies with you and give them to anyone that you meet on your way. How do you approach people? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I have these chocolate gold coins in my handbag, and I give them out to children, or I even give it to some adults, and some of them will say, we don't like chocolate, or they'll turn up their nose. That's fine, I'll put it back and find somebody else. But the other thing I've started taking recently, which is a very Indian theme, is carrying pound coins. Because in India, part of our whole culture used to be giving money to people who were less well off. So I carry these pound coins, and sometimes I'll give them to a child or to somebody else, and they're never going to see me again. So they're really happy, and it makes them happy. And I do that all the time too, so I really enjoy that too.
I love it.
May I add one story about something that I do? Because food is such a big part of my life. It's food, people, and kindness. So every time, even the Sainsbury's guy who comes to deliver my shopping every week, I will never let anyone leave my house without some food. So even the Sainsbury's guy, if I'm cooking food, I'll give him some to take away. Otherwise, I always have cakes and I'll give them that. And I will never, ever let anyone enter without leaving. And they never forget it. Often the Sainsbury's guy will come and tell me, my wife says, are you going to that lady's house because she gave you food last time? And so it's also kindness never gets forgotten. So we can do it in different ways, but I think really we have to find what really makes us feel good, because that feeling of goodness then you give to someone and it comes back forever. If I've had any success in life, it's because other people have opened doors for me. And that, it goes back to the time how I met Cherie Blair when I set up the Asian Women of Achievement Awards in 1999. And everybody said, you must invite the Prime Minister's wife. How do you do that? So I rang up number 10 Downing Street and said, will Mrs. Blair come to our awards? And they actually said yes. Normally I wasn't expecting that. And then I asked the next question, because the only thing you get for in life without asking is an infectious disease. Everything else you have to ask for. So I said, will she wear an Indian outfit? And they said she doesn't have any. And I said, I can bring some to Downing Street. So they said, okay, will you? So I actually took the outfits to Downing Street. She wore one of them. And she came to our awards, and that's been a life changer for me.
And you became such good friends since then.
Yes, absolutely. She's become our patron. She's opened so many doors for me. I remember the time when the Prime Minister of India was having lunch with her husband, Tony Blair, and his wife was having lunch with Cherie, and she asked me to come and have lunch. There were 4 of us having lunch at Downing Street. Something I would never have expected and had no aspirations to. But, that's what life is about. So if that happens to me, I have to make sure I make it happen for other people.
That is so sweet. It's beautiful. I love that story when you went to Downing Street with all the outfits for Cherie Blair. Probably not something you would ever thought is going to happen when you arrived in England.
No,
in
I
didn't. 70s.
Everything that's happened, when I look back on my life here, and I think if I can have done this, and the story I love really is when my younger son told me he wanted to do his MBA at Oxford, and being the Indian mother, I said, I'll come with you when you're looking around. He said, all right, fine. So we went to Oxford, and he was going to the business school. So he was going around the business school, and I went inside the office and said, what do you guys do for women? So they looked at this middle-aged Indian woman and said, what do you do? So I told them what I did. Well, he got in. I was so relieved. And I got a call from them 2 weeks later saying, would I be the keynote speaker on the first day of term, the Women and Women's Alumni? So I told him, I'm speaking on the first day of your term to the girls. Don't tell anyone, because if I make a mess, nobody will go out with you. But I actually took my potatoes along because I take food everywhere. And it was a big success, and he married one of them. And so life is all about opportunities that just come your way. And so, I find it very hard to make predictions about what's going to happen. But I think we all have things happening that we have to take seriously and make sure we pass it on. That's what's really important.
Mm. And you keep on doing it too, with so many people. It's uncountable how many lives you touched over those years. I don't think we can count it in any way.
I think, it's so important that we keep doing that. So every day I'll think of something that I want to do. So recently we went to South Korea. And I said, I want to see, at my age, the thing I've said is I want to see a new country every year. So last year we went to Algeria, we went to Japan. This year I thought, I'm going to Singapore, I'll go to South Korea. I booked the ticket, not realizing it's 6 hours away, the flight, but I went. And it was amazing. Again, a totally different culture where I learned so much. So I think we need to always try to do things that are totally new, discover new lands, because that's so important for all of us. We really have to. We have to really plant trees under whose shade we will never sit. And that's the way of doing it. It's going somewhere totally different.
Amazing. This brings me to collaboration, which is a big, obviously, theme in your life. We live in a culture that idealizes hyper-individualism. The self-made person, the lone wolf that succeeded despite of all the hardship and struggles. And I do feel like we almost have like a cult of suffering, that it has to be really hard in order to be seen as valuable. And your life shows a very, very different story, because again and again you've shown that collaboration, not competition, could be a path to success. And right now we are facing really, really serious global challenges, enormous ones that they cannot be solved by individuals. They really can be only solved by collaboration. And I'm wondering, do you believe that collaboration is no longer optional, but is actually essential for us right now in those uncertain times?
I couldn't agree with you more. For me, collaboration, synergy, doing things together with people is the only way forward. If somebody's going to compete with you, there are going to be no winners in the end. People don't realize, I'm not that much older than everybody. I've seen how when people behave like that, it comes back to haunt them. So often you see someone, I say, if they haven't behaved correctly, somebody said, they still succeeded. But it's not over till the fat lady sings. So there's a long journey. And so therefore, I think collaboration, helping others, will make sure that you're helped on the journey.
Yeah.
So I think it's vital. I think competition doesn't play a part if you're just going to compete so you can win and somebody else can lose. I don't think in the long run it pays off.
How we can unlearn that? Because that's been really ingrained in our culture so much that subconsciously we don't believe that there is other way. You know what I mean? That it feels like we really have to unlearn something that we've been conditioned to. How we can do that?
I'm really disappointed if people have that ingrained in their life. It was never part of my life. A lot of people tell me, how come you're confident? And I said, well, so many people say no to me. I just ask somebody else then, And it's very easy if everything works your way. It never. Everyone has those challenges. But I think you really, really, if it is ingrained in you, you have to unlearn it. And unlearning it is by doing it a different way. And all of us can learn. I mean, I have a very hard life in many ways because 20 years ago I had a hearing problem and I'm profoundly deaf. So if I don't wear my hearing aids, I can't hear. And that's a real challenge. But then, I could easily say I'm giving up. But then you find ways of doing it. And I think it's also important to be open, to share whatever you want with others so that they can help you on the journey. So that's, again, collaboration. So I think people have to really make it part of their life, that they decide these are the things that are important, these are my values, and I'm going to live by them, not just because everybody else says something is important. When you look around the world, you'll see so many people who do things you don't agree with. Just stay away from them, because there are always some that you will agree with. I think we have to have, for me, what's helped me most in my life is the people I know. Because when I'm looking for an answer, I never have all the answers. But if I can pick up the phone and ask somebody totally different, I will learn something.
In order to collaborate with other people, we firstly need to realize that we do not have all the resources like knowledge, skills, access, perspective. So that is the starting point, this realization that we need help. The problem is that in the society we're living in, actually asking for help is very stigmatized because it's seen as weakness, as dependency, sometimes as failure. So people are afraid of asking for help. So my question to you is, what do you think, what kind of leaders can we become when we are not afraid asking for help?
May I just twist that slightly around? I think if you ask for help, it's not a weakness. It shows the person that you're strong enough to ask for that help. Because when you're asking for something, the answer can be yes, the answer can be no. But when I'm looking for an answer, if I knock at 5 doors, I'll get an answer from at least one. So you have to ask for help. I can never do anything on my own. There's certain things I can, but we all have challenges. So I think asking for help is not a weakness. To me, it's a strength. And, the person you ask the help for, you're actually honoring them because it's a privilege. I feel very honored if somebody thinks I'm good enough to help them. So I think it's a mindset that you have to change the way you look at life.
I'm thinking about a lot of people who do struggle or they really suffer, whatever that is, if it's financial or with health or with career, whatever, or mental health, physical health, mental health. And most of people still really, really struggle to ask for that help. Maybe even if they do know that they need it, but there is this barrier. What would you say to those people? Like how they can go through that wall of resistance to find this courage to ask for help and be vulnerable? Because I also believe that showing your vulnerability is strength. Yeah. But how to get there if someone doesn't know how to approach someone and actually show that vulnerability and ask for what they need?
I think sometimes you have to try it. It may not work the first time, but I always remember this wonderful quotation. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. So if you want to ask for help, start doing a couple of times. You may have people who don't help you, but you will find somebody who will. And once you do it once and you ask help again a second time and it starts to come, it'll become part of what you do. So I think we have to try things that don't work and make it work for us. And again, it's collaboration. Find somebody else who will also tell you that story. And you'll find somebody who will tell you something that's worked well. So, never give up. To me, there's nothing called failure. It's a way of not doing it. Just try another way.
Yeah.
And from my age, I can say that I've had so many times where I've had to, when I first started, I didn't know how to cook. And then when I wrote my first cookery book and I was being invited, I self-published it. And so after I only sold 10 copies, I decided, how do I sell these copies? So I was ringing up bookstores and saying, will you stock my book? And they said, are you a celebrity? Are you on television? Are you famous? No, nobody wanted it. And so I came up with this new idea that I'll bring my electric wok into the bookstore and make potatoes from the book. And after 10 of them saying no, one said yes. And he said, I'll serve some wine too, in case the potatoes aren't good, I guess. Anyway, I went along. It was a huge success. So I started traveling all around the country with my wok, with my Indian spice box, and making potatoes and selling my book. So it was something totally I never had any ambitions of doing. So the wok has now been inside Oxford, Cambridge, London Business School, the Bank of England, about 70 or 80 corporates where I talk about leadership and end with making potatoes. So, was that the way to go? I had no idea. So the time when my second book came out, I was totally on, it was very easy for me because it became, part of my excellence is not an act but a habit. So it became a habit.
Part of asking of help, for 100% sure, it's going to be a moment when we are rejected. It happens all the time. It happened to me. I'm sure it happened to you as well. Despite of the legend that no one says no to Pinky, we all have some no's, right? How to deal with rejection? Because that is one of the fears that a lot of people have. It's like, oh, what am I going to do if somebody's going to say no?
Yeah. Be creative, be innovative, go to someone else, go to someone who's totally different. I mean, I've had so many people who've said no to me for doing something and I've had to find someone else. And suddenly it'll come from somewhere where you least expect. And that is not always going to come from where you expect. And so I think really just never give up. That's part of life, is that you have to find what you want. And if you don't find it for a reason, then something else will come up which is totally different. And it'll make the journey right for you. So never give up. Don't be afraid of failure. Don't lose your confidence, because nobody can take that away from you. It's you who are losing the confidence, not somebody else who's losing the confidence in you, but it's yourself. So be very, very powerful in yourself.
There is this saying that rejection is a God's protection. And I really believe in it. Every time when I experience rejection,
for a reason.
I know there is a reason for that.
Yeah.
And then usually I can see it much later.
Yeah.
But every time it's pretty mind-blowing that the trajectory is completely changing, and it's almost always changing for better.
Yeah, it's for a reason. So don't be afraid. It's not, as I keep saying, you won't know right till the end. Something that happens, you didn't want it to happen, but then what comes out of it turns out to be even better. So it's a journey for everyone.
This is something we spoke about many times over the last years, which is the fact that a lot of people go through life approaching relationships with the very transactional mindset. It's kind of this thought in the back of the head, how somebody can help me, or how they can help me to climb, what I can get out of them. You live in a completely different way. You don't think about what people can do for you, but what can you learn from them? You're constantly curious. Everywhere you go, whoever you talk to, you're very, very curious to learn something from people. Can you share an example of the moment when you followed your curiosity and then something very unexpected happened, some incredible doors just opened?
Because I was curious.
Because you were just curious. Didn't expect anything in return.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously one of them is obviously speaking at Oxford. Did I ever expect to speak at Oxford? I'm an associate fellow there. And then to be, the first time I was invited to speak at Cambridge, and I was very curious as to who'd be there, and they said there were going to be 150 MBA students, and the speaker before me was the head of Barclays, and the speaker after me was going to be the head of Goldman Sachs or something. I said, I'm irrelevant, so, why will I be there? So I was quite curious as to how I could in some way have an impact on these students, and so that's the first time I asked the question is, can I bring my wok into Cambridge and cook in the lecture theatre, cook spicy Bombay potatoes? They said, nobody's ever done that. So I actually stood my ground, said I really, really would like to. And after doing everything they allowed me to, and they asked me back the next year. So I think, the whole thing about being curious is you have to find out what will work for this. It may be something very different.
How to find out what people want?
Yeah.
How would you find? How did you know that Prince Charles is going to be interested in something?
Well, one just doesn't know. One just hopes the way they accept it gives you evidence of that. There are some people who say, this is what you did was relevant to me. But again, with my awards, every year we have 50 people shortlist. For the last 5 years, every year I invite all 50 to my house for lunch. And I'm curious, will they come? Will they not come? Will they enjoy it? And I've seen how, where they show what they enjoy. And you learn by watching and making others, asking for feedback. Don't be afraid. You'll hear things that you don't want to hear. And then you have to think of it differently. But out of the 50 I invite, at least 30, 35 will come. And then you mix them up with other people and tell them, I don't want you ever to call me back. Just come meet people, make a difference, and keep in touch. So I think, the whole thing is following a philosophy that I believe in, that's worked for me. I want to make it as part of their life. If they want, they can turn around and say, well, I don't. A lot of people say, oh, we'll never invite people over because we don't know how to cook, and we don't know, it's too much trouble. Everybody has their own way of doing it, but you can find something that works. So I think be creative, be innovative. That's really important.
Collaboration obviously means that we need to know people first before we can collaborate with anyone. And that very often means networking. A lot of people hate networking. They cringe on the idea of it. They feel overwhelmed, stressed. It can take a lot of energy. It can also feel awkward. How would you reframe networking so it feels more human and less performative or transactional?
I don't like the word networking because when people tell me you're a very good networker, to me, that doesn't make my day at all. It doesn't make me feel, oh my God, I'm so, I'm good. I think for me, it's about connections and about learning about people, connectivity, emotional intelligence there, of being empathic, of being compassionate and learning about people. So networking is, I can understand, I go into places where often they're all young people or they're executives, and they see, she's so old and she's not, big, huge in a big company. But I just go and I want to learn. So the curiosity goes and you ask people questions, hear their stories. So when people talk about networking, I actually cringe because I don't like the word that much. So it's about connectivity, connections, compassion, and empathy, and really learning. I mean, I just love talking to people. So every day I will talk to 5 people I don't know. It could be on the train, it could be in a restaurant. That day somebody invited me, and sometimes you meet someone, all they do is talk about themselves, not even taking into account if it's of any interest to you, but they will just go on. So I think it's so important when you meet people to ask them questions instead of telling your story before, everything else. So I think that curiosity comes back, and learning and really, really building your emotional intelligence is so important. But I also think what's really, and the KQ I have is the kindness quotient. And the other thing very important is the likability quotient. So in networking, if you have to use that word, a likability, who are the people we like? We really like people who take an interest in us, who are appreciative, who are open. There's a lovely story of Winston Churchill, who was our Prime Minister so many years ago. His mother apparently went out with 2 men who were standing to be Prime Ministers in the UK. It was Gladstone and Disraeli. And so the press all asked her after she'd had dinner with them, what did she think? And she said when she went out with one of them, she came back thinking he was the cleverest man in the world. But when she went out with the other one, she came back thinking she was the cleverest woman. And the one who made her feel as if she was the cleverest was the one who won the election. So the likability quotient is about, why do people like others? I think that's something everyone should ask.
Since you came to the UK, you've been in minority in more than one category. You are an ethnic minority woman, you're a Muslim woman, and you are someone who is living with disability. Personally, what I found always extremely striking is that none of those labels in any way defined you or limited you. But for many people who are in minority, it can feel very unsafe. When they walk into the room when everyone is different, and it could be anything from the skin color, gender, wealth, sexual orientation, background. When people feel different, they very often feel they do not belong. And when this happens, we have the tendency to shrink, to kind of put the mask on and start pretending a little bit that we are someone else because we are afraid of revealing our true nature, true self, because it doesn't feel safe. So we start pretending. We doubt ourselves, and we are starting to adapt into trying to blend in the room, not to really show our uniqueness or our difference. I'm wondering, how do you always find confidence when you walk into the room where you're clearly completely different?
It must be something in my personality. I've gone into rooms where I'm the only woman, sometimes the only ethnic minority, maybe the Muslim woman. I've never felt I'm, any less than anybody else, because if anything, I'm going to learn. So I think people have to, within themselves, have the confidence enough to come and say that even though I'm not like anybody else, I've got something that they may not have. So I think the thing again is starting conversations with people who are very different to you and asking them questions so you're learning and they feel they can talk about themselves. So I can't understand why people would feel they don't belong because they're different, because I've always gone in everywhere and just felt, I'm just going to make the best of this. So for me, it's a hard one, except to say that, why are you any different? You've got something that's amazing, and let people discover it. So I think my advice to anyone going in, just be the best version of yourself, because we all have things that other people don't have. They're all differences of qualities. I went the other day to the 200 people place right in one of the really nice buildings in Belgravia, and I couldn't hear the speaker because he was speaking foreign with my hearing problems. I was listening and saying, why am I here? And they were all very different. But I spoke to two people that I enjoyed. I learned something, so it was worth my while. So I think one has to believe in oneself. So, for everyone, self-belief is so important. And that's something that we all can control. The things you can't control, but your own self-belief, you have total jurisdiction on that.
You said something that is very, very true and very important, that when we go to this room that we're very different, as I said, we often tend to shrink and hide our true self. And the problem is that when we're doing it, we are disconnecting ourselves from the very thing that is very valuable, which is we come with different perspective, we come with a different story, we come with a different wisdom. You said that we need to trust ourselves in this, and I 100% agree, but it's still very hard for people to do that. If you would give any advice to people who feel, oh, maybe it's easy to say, it's easier to be said than done, what would you say, how they can tap into that strength or this value that they can bring into the room where everyone is different, how people can tap into it?
Yeah. I think you go somewhere and be the best version of yourself. And if it doesn't work, if you come out thinking, oh, it didn't work, try a different way next time. You may think it didn't work, but nobody else thought that of you. Remember, the fragrance always stays in the hand that gives the rose. So be the person who does something for someone else, because the fragrance will always remain with you. So I think people should go in and do whatever they can. And sometimes, you've been very successful, but you don't think that. Sometimes you've said something, oh my God, I made such a mess up there. And sometimes, no, you were really good. So I think, really people must believe in themselves. They must go and practice it several times. Go to a lot of these places where perhaps you feel insecure, and try it again and see, has anything changed? And ask people, sometimes people will give you feedback that's relevant. Sometimes they'll tell you a whole lot of rubbish, I mean, there are people who do those kind of things, who tell you something because they think you want to hear it. But, as you grow older and I'm pretty intuitive, so I know very quickly when somebody's saying something to me what their reason is. Because we all can, if your EQ is high, you can really learn to interpret what others are doing. And so how do you actually use that to help your own growth? So, about 20 years ago, I got Bell's palsy, and Bell's palsy is something you get. There's shingles, Bell's palsy, and chicken pox or something. And it was just a flu. And suddenly I was looked as if I'd had a stroke. And it was really, really difficult. People kept saying, oh, poor you, what's happened? But I mean, it took a long time to come back. Some people never get that back. But I think everything happens for a reason. It was a real challenge then. But you learn from that. So you have to look at life differently.
You always talk a lot about kindness, obviously. Yeah. This has been your message for decades. Yeah. I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on self-kindness as also a practice to maybe build this resistance in ourselves to go outside, ask for help, to connect with people, not to be afraid to show our difference, our uniqueness through this practice of self-kindness? Yeah. Do you practice self-kindness?
I think, to be kind to yourself, sometimes you have to, because, sometimes when you're feeling really pretty grotty about something, which you can, to be kind to yourself and give yourself that sense of belonging, sense of, yes, I've done something really well. That's important too. You have to really believe in yourself. And for me, I think what's given me most strength is I'm constantly meeting new people. I love the fact that going to South Korea, I met people so different to ourselves. And South Korea has the lowest birth rate, and the women there, the young women, are not encouraged to work if they get married or if they have children. So a lot of them are not getting married and not having children. And so I worry about them because I think, yes, they're working hard now and they don't want to. When they're 60 and 70 and they're on their own, how will they do it? And so that kind of thing, is what I'm thinking of. They're obviously thinking, how can we cope now? So I think, to go and to learn about others, you realize that other people have as many challenges as you do. So be kind to others, be kind to yourself.
Yeah, so true. You build the Women of the Future network, leaning to things that our society very often undervalues, such as kindness, being in minority, collaboration. That network empowered thousands of girls and women across the world. When you look at this today, how does it feel?
I feel very happy because I've learned so much, and we've opened doors and people have opened doors for me. It's changed lives when people tell me that. It's changed my life. And it gives me hope for the future because I'm always so, when you talk about kindness, when I had the idea of the Women of Future Awards, I'd been running the Asian Women. And I remember I had the idea, and at about 11:50 near midnight PM, I wrote to Sherry Blair on email, because at that time it was 2005. And I said, I've got this idea of supporting, will you support me? And she came back in 10 minutes to say, of course I will. And, it's other people who help you on the journey. And if I hadn't got her approval, it would have been more of a difficult journey for me here. She was the Prime Minister's wife. She was happy to support us. So I think with everything that I've done, what's given me hope for the future is that we've made a difference to life. People have said how it's changed their lives, how it's led them to do things they wouldn't have. And I hope, and from one program, we've grown to 10 programs. And I remember with ESG, I didn't know the meaning of ESG 5 years ago, and then decided to set up our first global program, which was 50 Rising Stars in ESG. For women under 35 around the world. How do you get people from Colombia, Peru, Brazil, Africa, when all you've been doing is working within the UK and in Asia? But we went and people helped us on the journey. And it was amazing because the Financial Times are our media partners, and they said they will publish the list of these rising stars in the ESG around the world. So we wrote to all these women, and I found that really interesting. We said, you're going to be on the list. Don't tell anybody right now. It's going to be published on this date. But on that day, the Financial Times is hosting a brunch. And if any of you can come, and they were from all over the world. So I expected the people from the UK, maybe from Europe. People actually paid for themselves to fly in from Peru, from Colombia, from Mexico, from Nigeria and Pakistan. We don't have the budget to pay for them. But they all came here just to be at that brunch. And they said, we'll come. And of course, in typical form, my son Imran, who works with me, said, Mum, they're coming all that way just for this one event. That's not fair. You better do an event for them the day before. So I said, okay, we'll have 40 people for lunch here the day before. So these women come from all around the world. And it shows the power of people wanting to meet others.
So over the last 3 years, both of us had very important events, turning life events, which is facing death.
Yeah.
And usually this kind of experiences that we both in very different way went through is the time of reevaluating a lot of things in life. And one of the things that I personally reevaluated a lot is the meaning of time. What truly matters in life, what is our purpose, how to use the time. And I wanted to ask you, you were in coma after your accident for almost 2 weeks and had quite a long journey of recovery. Is there anything you felt that changed in your perception of time? And perhaps the advice you could give to all of us on how we can open the doors that we really want to open without waiting for permission or perfect condition.
I think one never should wait for permission to do something. It should feel right for you. I think obviously with my brush with that, what it led me to do is have my memoirs written because I wanted my grandchildren, who are what they call they're called Chindians, they're half Chinese, half Indians, and I wanted them to know the stories. But I also realized what helped me most with the people in my life, what helped me to come back to feeling good was because I had so much support and love. And I think we need to in our life. The one thing I realized, I want to keep learning, I want to see new places, I want to keep making a difference. So I think kindness, again, was very important. And for me, it's also about purpose. And very important is, again, when you've had that brush with that, the importance of trust. So I think, again, if you're a person who can trust others and people trust you, it just changes the way you look at things. And I think also the kindness and the goodness of everyone. I mean, I was overwhelmed with the kind of support that people sent my way. I mean, I was really, it was very difficult to understand. And, the thing is, I was very lucky when I came out, didn't realize how bad that coma had been. I was just woke up and this was, happening. I couldn't really walk and things like that. But others helped me on the journey. So I think if I'm looking to what I've learned is the importance of having good people in your life, having the right values in your life and being trustworthy and being kind. And never be afraid. I mean, the main thing is fear is something that holds so many of us back. So my advice to people is just be the best version of yourself. And always, Mother Teresa said something, let no one come into your life and leave without feeling happier. So how do we become those stars that others are to us?
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the New Human Identity podcast. I truly hope you find it inspiring. If this episode resonated with you, I'd really love to hear from you. You can subscribe to the podcast, and if you enjoy the content, then please leave the review. And if you feel this episode could help someone else, please share it with them. I'd like to say special thank you to Mustafa Özkek and Artentainment for being cultural supporters of this episode. Artentainment is a platform dedicated to documenting artists and creative journeys through film, photography, and storytelling. And last but not least, thank you for being here.